All right, welcome to Roleplay Cafe. It's Dale here. This is a early morning video response to Sam Chalice and Chains. Uh, this video response to his video response to our Candid Conversations podcast, um, in which he speaks about the editing of the words of power, the inclusion of the words of power mechanic inside of the document, the Dark Age Man document. Now, at the time of the podcast, we had received via email that segment, that mechanic in specific, the page that still needs some edits to be done. Now, you got to realize this document, the game system, had been rewritten several times and had things added and removed, and a lot of when you're designing or developing a game will come into it goes through a process. We knew what we wanted to do initially with the game and what direction that we wanted to go, so we had to implement certain mechanics, test them, trim fat. And I believe, honestly, that section, that mechanic, was slipped through the cracks, as it were. Now, on the face of things, it is, legitimately something that can occur in gameplay. I do agree with Sam, that it doesn't need to be defined. When I had read that, I did an edit. And then we did the podcast. So my edit, and Jason is obviously the primary writer. He wrote the massive bulk of it as we work together. He's just, I'm more verbose and tend to go on in my writings, where he can be a little bit more succinct, but nevertheless, we did, when I approached the edit, when I looked at it, in hindsight of us playing so many games and of what our original intent was, that was a realization that we never call these words of power out in game. Now, they are, to my mind, examples of how you do interact and engage in game. Some of the examples was basically words of power being a boast. Like if you, Sam suggested calling up your accomplishments, like in the Last Kingdom. When Uhtred did that, I slayed him, and it carries, of course, it's tied to your prestige. So you can do that. It's a heraldry in effect, and it gives you more weight to swing around, and others may duck or buckle or bend a little bit, or to your will, or whatever you're trying to do. And if it's questionable, you roll the dice to see where it falls, where your fate falls, as it were. So but see, these, and there's other examples in there, like calling on a saint or a deity or what have you to invoke a name, basically. They have something done. Whether or not the people are superstitious, or whether or not, they yield. If it's questionable, then you roll a dice. But see, these things that we do as you conceptualize your character, and he has his weaknesses, his flaws, and his strong suits. So when you're playing a character in game, you leverage your strong suits, your abilities, your profession, what have you, to your advantage, to try to live in this world. And those are naturally occurring things that will come forth from the character when you're playing them. If you are braggadocious swords sellsword, then you're gonna most probably, when you're in your boasting, you will bring up things like that. I don't have to, like I told Jason in the podcast, like keep my eyes on the character sheet to see what I can or can't do. That's totally against the concept and the direction of what we want the game to be. Stay in character, in the mindset of the character, and do what he would naturally do. And you can't do that pulling yourself out and looking at a list of do's and don'ts and what you're allowed to do and what your skill set. So it keeps the eye off the IC ball and character ball. So to me, there were fine examples listed as far as what may prompt or be suggestive towards somebody to open their mind to a wider concepts of how you can breathe life or express your character in play. So that's what I did with Edit. I do agree that the most glaring flaw about the original mechanic was the assertion that they were small and not powerful. Words of power are small but not. How do you presuppose that? You don't know if a small thing could have a butterfly effect in effect on a larger scale, even in regular gameplay. You never know. And I'm sure there's a large amount of examples of in our play to where you do something and it has repercussions. Or you may do something, like Jason mentioned in his video earlier today about like, mechanically, when people want to do something powerful, it just goes into the number of points that you have or what have you. A lot of like I speak about the mechanics of Dark Age of Man. It's narrative mechanics. What you say becomes real. If it's questionable, we roll a dice to see if your intent bears fruit, and it's slotted into the actuality of the world. So as you're playing, you breathe life into the world socially around the table, everybody at the table. So everything that you say has weight and affects others. So I don't need to define like I am calling upon a word of power or word, to do this or that thing that you may be attempting to do. You just, in essence, do it. I think as human beings, when you're writing a rule book, you like to kind of set the parameters of what you can or can't do and lead people along that. Well, in this game, we entrust players to play genuinely their characters, which they will. They will. When you're sitting around a table, other players are playing their character. There is a consensus at the table of how you should interact with the world. The level of magic may be different at some tables, are non-existent at others. The level of the level of suspension of belief may be different to some degree, with monstrosities or the supernatural or what have you. But that's all that precedence of how the table interacts will be determined and self-balancing as you play. So when you're playing this, when you're playing Dark Age of Man, that naturally occurs, and everybody plays their character off of one another. The presenter representing the non-player characters in character as he jumps in there, and he's interacting with the players at the table. You play genuinely, so it isn't a necessity that we have to have anxiety as game developers to put up mechanical restrictions to keep you in line, to keep the players in line. You can entrust the players around a table to play true to the character inside of the setting and the world that they create. Let them do it. So, as far as defining what can be or can't be done, I've never been a fan of that. Even using the word prerequisite, I don't like. It's suggestions. In fact, one of the early concepts of the game was using it as a guide. If we would do like a world setting, it may be modeled after a travel guide, you know. So I don't even like to say a rule book. It's a guidebook. Sam, you hit it nail on the head when you said it's a framework. It is. I agree with what you're saying there. Like I said in the rewrite, that was the first sentence I got rid of, rather, was that it presupposed that these words of power were small. I still used words of power because I didn't know. And when you're working with somebody, I didn't know what Jason, how he wanted to interpret it or say it, or, but as far as me, it doesn't even need to be defined in that way, because it makes people follow that line of thinking. When we want to be, in essence, we want to liberate players to role play. It's very simple. If I would back up, I would say the only reason we have body, mind, soul is essentially where it came. We switched it to spirit. Those three, we added luck because, let's face it, in the world, either you're lucky, the unknowable. The unknowable. Let's see if you get lucky and go the right way or the left way. Where does it lead? Because we don't know. We're naive on that, right? So we have luck roll, and we have prestige because the whole hierarchy of the Middle Ages, from the peasant all the way up to the noble, there's a hierarchy that is there and has to be represented. So those attributes are important, and the only ones that really matter. Everything defaults to 0. But if you have a -1 body, or if you have +2 mind, then it's just going to add those essentially attribute points to your roll to see if it falls more so in your favor or not. And a lot of what is tied to a lot of what the legacy of a character is more heraldry. It's more word of mouth. That's why you say you get a repute point if there's witnesses to what's going on. Word of mouth will spread. They will hear about you. And a lot of that is baked into the system, the words of power aspect. Because if you are renowned for having a stout body, then it is going to automatically, that baked in 1 point on your body goes to the fact that you are effectually affecting how other people view you and building your renown and your legacy as you step out onto the field and the other guy looks at you and is more hesitant about coming at you because he's heard tales. So in effect, the words of power, where we can say that it is legitimate that words of power, from boasting to, from the supernatural aspect to curses to everything, is effectual. That's how you interact in the world. And in large degree, that's already baked into the attributes. That's why we have the repute points the way we do have them, and why they're applied. They're based off of the renown that you've built. So, for me to double down on that and say that it's necessary to bring another mechanic to bolster that is not needed. So I do agree. The aspect of true names of you mentioned the Dresden novels. Yeah, the great writer Jim Butcher. I read the first 4 of those, I think, way back in the day. I've even got the series on TV. Yeah, knowing your true name, or the true name of the sword, in a way, in effect, classical D&D, whenever you identify an object, is similar to that. Then you can use its abilities, right? So maybe retroactively, as far as items, like if we have a good sword or we find out that it is its name, maybe that would raise it from a good sword to an excellent sword. We do have that, and the excellent sword have the connotations of being some kind of supernaturally imbued or magically imbued. So that, from a item or weapon or armor standpoint, could be baked into the the attribute of the sword. Is it +1, +2? That could go there, and it could be almost like when you define it. That's what when you define the sword's name and invoke it, then it could jump up if unknown before. Walking around with a rowdy sword, and all of a sudden you find out that this, then it jumps in. I'm just saying, a lot of this, if you rewind it, everything that we can conceive of outside of the norms of just the attributes, whether it be an attribute of a sword or a person, is already baked into the +1 or the +2 that's given. Like I said, otherwise, whenever you're out there, if somebody's a witch, they may have a natural proclivity to, or tendency to, curse someone, just as an expression of character, as flavor that they want to have, and if people aren't aware of this, maybe of the different possibilities of different characters, then, like I did with the edit, just list the possibilities. You can boast, you can curse. These are some things that you might want to think about. This probable. But then again, you don't want to restrict it to just this. Keep in mind that these are suggestions. It's open to you. There's a lot of things through if we had put up guardrails on this game, and the joy of giving it to another presenter, like you, Sam, you sit there and run a game for us, and you start dropping in the seeds, visions, to which I had not previously given any kind of thought to, as far as at my seat in the presenter or for anyone else. And I said, this is really screwing with Boethius's worldview and his mindset. Is he going insane? What is he saying? It's brilliant. So we went down that road with you. You can see that. I didn't want to preset in a game to where it restricts you, that these are your options, Sam. You only put seeds down that has a physical, empirical effect. And you did that, and I said, wow. You want possibilities for a game to be limitless. And the different people that play it opens your eyes. Jason's mentioning of you running the game really on a macro and micro level, and how that enhances epic fantasy play. The things are going, like the battle at Helm's Deep, and you've got Gandalf over here, and you've got the dwarf and the archer fighting, on the ground, and everybody's intense. You zoom out, you zoom back into a character, and you see what's going on. So you feel like you're really focused on character inside the massive amount of chaos that surrounds the character, the world at large. So that's perfect. He said we could do that. And you did a supernatural level that was a juxtaposition of what was going on at the large, good versus evil, and how that affected, the armies. And you could see there was a tie-in there, and he goes, wow. Sam really opened it up for me more so. We knew we knew when we made a game of possibilities that were innately there and remain to be seen or dug out. It's an excitement when you can give the game and you say, what can you do with this? It's open to you. We don't want to set restrictions on anybody, So do it. But I would submit that a lot of what we're trying to conceive of is already baked in to some degree. Now, if we want to talk about naming somebody or finding out the true name, like I said, Rumpelstiltskin or what have you, that might be more so a part of, it could be listed as a suggestion. There could be fairy creatures. There could be anybody that once you find their name, it maybe either outright demolishes them or, weakens them to a certain point. There was a time that Brian ran the Frail Farm and he had the Hobbs we were going up against, which are pretty much fairy creatures, but to have them placated, we had to play the violin, which my character, Mikhail, accidentally broke. So that was a part of the whole overarching problem or dilemma that we was having to deal with, So it's there. I would suggest maybe it's maybe baked into a little bit of story, but it could be a fine addition to the rule set or the guidebook, as I like to call it, to add that. These are some potentials, that you can go, but this is not by any means a limited list that we're given. This is just some things that we've noticed that you can add that may add flavor, and the world is yours. Open it up. Think of things. But I mean, I definitely do think that knowing a true name, especially for what we've allowed with low magic and the creatures, the fake creatures or the supernatural creatures or what have you, whether it's finding the name of the demon or, a fairy creature or what have you, to weaken it is important. And that's is kind of a staple and classic fantasy literature anyway. So that would be fine. That may be an addition that we need to go to, but I don't know if we necessarily need to define it. That would be something that Jason and I could talk about. But we do appreciate you running these games for us, opening our eyes a little bit wider to the possibilities that you've opened up for us from the presenter seat, and seeing you doing it has been a joy, and playing the games with you. So anyway, I digress. It's been great listening to the videos and getting the input we've gotten from everyone, and the play. It's amazing. But I'll let y'all go now, and all right. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.